Story 1. I was dead for 6 minutes. I was lying on the gurney, and I was getting colder. Somewhere, my body started warming up, and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was no longer in pain. All the noise from the emergency room just went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter, and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly, it was just black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as if it was like before I was born. Then the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises. I felt this massive pain. Then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. The smell was so bad I started vomiting. I remember the doctors turning me on my side and watching my vomit spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I have ever experienced, and being revived was the worst. Story 2. Not really sure what happened, and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep, so we took her to the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3 days, her health kept deteriorating. On the 3rd day, my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night, my daughter woke up and asked about Grandma. No one had said anything to her or in the room with her. We asked her what she meant. She told us that Grandma came to her in a dream and said, "It's not your time yet. I'll go for you." Immediately, the next day she was almost 100% better. Story 3. There are some researchers who have been collecting and quantifying the data of near-death experiences for years now. They have created 6 categories or stages of near-death experiences that generally sum up most experiences. The hellish experience can be either a mildly uncomfortable experience, a cold, dark, damp, loveless experience, or the traditional flames and devil experience. Some people say they are drawn out of this realm by an indescribable love. Very few people recount experiencing this. There is another type of experience where one has an out-of-body perspective and can travel freely. Often this happens in an operating room where one's heart has stopped, and the doctors are working to revive the patient. The individual may be able to go to other rooms in the hospital or travel across the country. If they remain in the hospital room, they do not always recognize their own bodies on the table and can feel confused. There has been a surge in near-death experiences since the 1960s when resuscitation techniques became more advanced. Much like many comments, there is another experience of blissful, warm darkness that just feels comfortable. It is indescribable nothingness, often without memory or any inkling of consciousness at all. The next experience is similar to the last, but with an additional light that is usually far away, emanating warmth, love, and forgiveness. The individual is either attracted to this light and goes toward it, or the light itself comes to the person. It allegedly gets better and better the closer one draws to the light, and so they continue. This is where the phrase "go or don't go to the light" likely comes from. This experience continues where the last leaves off, where the person has broken through the light to the other side. They are now experiencing a love, compassion, forgiveness, state of consciousness that is unlike anything they can put into words. Sometimes they encounter a sort of guide, which could be a loving anonymous being or a religious figure. If they experience this, it is sometimes linked to their beliefs on earth, but not always. This experience is sometimes accompanied by the most beautiful music. This being may present them to loved ones or show them a life review, which is a very common experience of those who have had near-death experiences. It may be at this point where the individual decides or is told to return to their body because they have work left to accomplish in their lives. Many people cite that as their reason for coming back. The final experience goes beyond the previous state of love and consciousness and is experienced only by relatively few people compared to the others. They say that they experience becoming one with the universe, universal energy that unites everything, or God. They have stated that they understand everything, and that knowledge is known just by thinking of a topic. People have different words to describe all these experiences, but what they typically agree on is that words themselves cannot come close to explaining their encounter for all of the aforementioned near-death experiences. Most experiences are overwhelmingly pleasant, They lose fear of death, and they cannot wait to return to this state. However, they know they must wait. The near-death experiences I've looked into pretty much all fall into these categories, so I'd like to hear any others that might not. As you can tell, this interests me greatly. I want to end this by saying that if you wind up researching near-death experiences, come to your own conclusions about them. Is there a reason for someone to be pushing a certain belief on you? I have confidence that what people say about their experiences, they themselves wholly believe to be true. Whether or not you do is up to your own judgment. There are people who make videos and give talks about near-death experiences they supposedly experience, but to me, some seem to be fake and over-rehearsed. Take what you want from my thoughts, and if you have any questions about this, I've done a fair share of looking into the topic and would love to discuss further. If you want any guidance on where to look first into gaining your own knowledge of near-death experiences, I can definitely help you find something. Story 4. I think about death a lot, like an insane, worrying amount. I cry about it a lot too. I'm terrified to die. I'm terrified of what comes after. And I'm terrified of losing people I love. This thread has actually made me feel a bit better about it, so thank you. I lost my mom last year, and I remember her telling me when I was little, because I would say at first, that she was scared to die. I'm glad to know that it isn't as bad as we both thought. Story 5. Anaphylaxis wasn't breathing. I considered all the hallucinations I experienced likely due to a hypoxic episode until I told my mom what I saw. A middle-aged man who wasn't in scrubs standing still at the end of my bed while all the staff were running around and doing their business. I was having a nonverbal conversation with him, and he was telling me to calm down and focus on breathing. He wore a tropical-style button-down shirt, one of those old-school newsboy hats, and had a very pleasant demeanor. Mom showed me a photo of my grandpa that I had never seen before, and it was the guy at the foot of my bed, and he died before I was even born. Edit. Didn't know this would comfort so many people. Just remember not to worry too much about death and remember to enjoy your life while you have it. Story 6. A friend of mine described it as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she does not fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. Story 7. My girlfriend is anaphylactic and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school, she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her autoinjector for adrenaline until the ambulance got there. Obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time, so by the time the ambulance got to her school, she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her autoinjectors, called the nurses fucking twats, and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They gave her a second direct injection of adrenaline, and this time it hit her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart failed. She stopped breathing, no pulse, nothing. Dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds, she was clinically dead. The scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness, you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind it. All despite the fact her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart but also restart it with the little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. Story 8. Overdosed. Flatlined. Didn't see a damn thing. When they hit me with naloxone, I woke up really mad, ripping IVs out of my arms, cursing out the poor, amazing staff who saved my life. Good times. 6 years ago now with all that behind me, luckily. Story 9. A black void. Then waking up in the emergency room surrounded by people running around like crazy. I was cold as fuck, but in reality just room temperature. I had to add and say that it was relatively peaceful, like being wrapped in a big warm blanket. Story 10. My wife and I discussed this at length. 4 years ago, she died twice in 3 months, needing full resuscitation both times. Both were lengthy rescues, and one resuscitation lasted for nearly 40 minutes. I asked her later, when she had recovered, if she remembered anything at all during the times she was clinically dead. She remembered nothing. Blackness. No light, no relatives, and no former pets waiting for her. Just black. Thankfully, also no pain. She finally passed 18 months ago, and I hope she felt no pain or worry the final time. It started with 2 spontaneous brain bleeds, technically beginning with her having lupus. The first brain bleed led to her passing, but they performed a craniotomy, revived her, then a rebleed occurred. The trauma from all that caused her lupus to worsen, which led to complete kidney failure and another cardiac arrest, passing and recovery, which led to 2 strokes. She recovered enough to be home and mostly independent, but had to go to dialysis 3 times a week for 3 years. She passed the final test to get on the kidney transplant list on Wednesday and had a massive cardiac and respiratory event at dialysis on Friday where she passed again, but was kept alive on life support. I waited a week hoping for recovery, but we disconnected life support per her wishes, a topic we had talked about many times. Story 11. I know 3 people who have been clinically dead and have come back. What they described is something much different than what people are discussing here. They all said, if you paraphrase, that it feels as if you're passing out. Someone compared it to overdosing on nitrous oxide, a feeling of your consciousness slowly getting focused into one point in the exact middle of your head, while your limbs lose feeling in a tingling, pleasant way, and then you lose consciousness. One girl said that when she came back into consciousness, she was hallucinating because she had no idea what was going on, and she started dreaming of something safe, like her mother hugging her in a warm bed. Story 12. My father committed suicide recently this year, and these responses are helping me find some comfort that his last moments were peaceful. I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who reached out. I'm going to counseling soon to help get through the hard times. I'm sorry for those who have experienced loss, and I'm glad we got to share this feeling of peace reading these, even if it's just for a moment. Story 13. I was on a lot of morphine, so it's still really hazy, and the fact it happened almost 6 years ago doesn't help my memory, but I'll try to recollect as accurately as I can what happened and what I experienced. I had appendicitis, and my foster parents at the time didn't take me to the hospital until almost 3 days after it had burst. I should have been dead well before they took me. Even the doctors called it a miracle. Well, I died while waiting for surgery. I had to wait for a pediatric surgeon to come in because no one else felt comfortable performing the surgery on a case this bad with a child this size. They took me to the adult hospital, not pediatrics, which was 40 minutes away. I was 14, 5'3", and weighed 75 pounds soaking wet. While I was waiting for the surgeon, I was in a room with the doctor, my 2 foster parents, and my grandmother, who is a registered nurse. As I said, I was really drugged up and couldn't focus on much or do anything. The monitor I was hooked up to would beep really loudly from time to time, and the intervals between beeps started to decrease rapidly. Turns out I wasn't breathing. I was conscious for the most part. I just kept forgetting to breathe. Doctors had to keep nudging me so I wouldn't sleep. I just remember being annoyed at this loud beeping that kept me from enjoying a nice sleep. The doctor had to step out for a second, and my grandmother assured him she could look after me for a moment. Unfortunately for her, she was out of her mind with rage at my foster parents. She didn't hold anything back. My grandma is a sweet Mormon Uten without a rude bone in her body. Well, I heard quite a few insults. She didn't notice I had passed out until the monitor signaled I had flatlined. This is the part where I died and is by far the most vivid part of the experience. I remember being capable of thought, but no thoughts were in my head. I can only describe it as being conscious of my spirit but without a body for my thoughts to be processed in. I just kind of existed without feeling, thinking, or being anything. I was floating. Honestly, at the time, it was a great feeling. I don't remember any visions of people, family, places, or anything like that, but I felt something wrap around me and comfort me. Without talking, I was assured I was okay, that there was nothing to be worried about, and at that point, my thoughts returned. I knew at that moment, without knowing how long I'd be able to keep thinking, that I had to go back. I didn't want to, But knowing that the last thing I'd see before I left mortal life was these two people who had abused me and neglected me, that did it. I wanted to get back to my body, fix my life so I could go back and live with my biological parents and feel loved again. In that moment, that's all I cared about. And then I sort of willed myself back. Doctors had tried to resuscitate me but had failed. Everyone was shocked when I opened my eyes, and seeing the tears in my grandma's eyes after thinking she'd lost me, that did it. I fixed my life, reinvented myself, and threw out all my anger, depression, rage, and everything else that put me in Brent and Karen's home. Honestly, the only anger I felt, the kind that makes you want to do anything possible to release it, in the last 5 years since I moved from their home is when I think about them and how they're still fostering youth, probably doing the same things with those kids. I live about an hour away from where they are now, and I have to restrain myself from driving up there, taking those kids, and going to the authorities with an explanation. The only reason I haven't done that is because I've tried telling the authorities what kind of people they are. I guess the words of a troubled youth don't stack up against the lies from people who have practiced this for years. Anyways, sorry for the rant at the end. I know that wasn't entirely what you'd asked, but it felt good to type out. Thanks for asking this question. It's been surprisingly therapeutic talking about this.